Okay, so what we're going to start off with is we are going to use the command terminal to use the Angular CLI and create a completely new project. Here we're going to be creating the Split Howdy project, and inside of that web app we are going to be adding our UI library. So using the Angular CLI, we're going to create this command. If you notice, what we're leveraging here is we're creating an application, just the outer shell of that application, followed by a strict flag equal to true. What this strict true is going to do for us is it's going to create our TS config. It's going to set certain rules where we cannot do any implicit this, and it's going to set strict null checks, so that way our application is being static typed and more strictly enforced when it comes to the way that we create our TypeScript files. So I'm going to run this app, and through the power of video magic, we are going to skip this load itself. Okay, so we created our project. We navigated into that Split Howdy folder that was created for us by the Angular CLI, and we call up Visual Studio Code in that project. So let's switch over. Okay. So from now on, whenever I'm calling the terminal, I'm going to be calling it from the editor, from Visual Studio Code. So here we go. All right. So this is what we get when we call the Angular CLI, when we create a new web project using the Angular CLI, and we pass the create application flag set equal to false. We only get our node modules, and we get our editor config, Angular JSON, our package, our README, and our TS config and TS lint. That's it. It's as bare bones as it can get. So now what we need to do is, inside of this application, of this web project, we need to create an application. And in this case, we're going to create a library application using the Angular CLI. So let me put this command here. So this command, we are calling ng generate library, because we want to create a library, Angular library, and we're calling it Split Howdy UI. And so we hit enter, and it's going to create another folder called projects, and in that folder is going to create Split Howdy UI. The Angular CLI is going to update our Angular JSON and package JSON. No, wait. Angular JSON and TS config JSON. And I am going to, with the power of video magic, skip through that process. Okay, so now we've completed the creation of our UI library using the CLI. And these are the changes that it made. So starting with a package JSON file, we pulled in the ng packager and build Angular dev kits. We also pulled in the ng packager toolkit that we're gonna be using to create our Angular package format, build distributable. And in the TS config JSON, I forgot to show you earlier, but we start, so when we set the flag, the strict equal to true flag, these were the new rules that were added to your TS config. If we then jump over to Angular JSON, we now have the new project, Split Howdy UI, with all of the options set up for its build and test. And then the default project is going to be Split Howdy UI. So whenever you use the Angular CLI generate commands, this is where it's gonna go and add those components. All right, so we created our library. So now what do we want to do? We want to start adding components, and we're going to be using the Angular CLI again for that. So let's but before we get to that piece, let's explore our UI library. This is what it looks like. Now we have a project called Split Howdy UI inside of this projects folder, and inside of that projects folder, you'll have your source folder along with a README and other configuration dedicated just to this particular library. Now, it's funny. Now that you have your UI library, you're going to, in a few, I'm not going to show this to you right now, but what you want to do in the future is you want to, whenever you're working with a UI library, you want to be able to create the UI library itself, project, Split Howdy UI, or whatever you want to call it. And then inside of that projects folder, you want to use the Angular CLI again, but this time you want to create an application. And this application is going to be used to showcase your UI library components and to do the development of those UI components in real time. And I don't have time to do that right now and show you how to do that in an Angular Angular UI library development workflow process right now. I will create another tutorial to show you that, but for right now we're just focused entirely at splitting the library, so we'll skip that. But I just want you to keep that in mind. This is an aside, I suppose. But right now, your project, typically your UI libraries will consist of two projects, the actual UI library and the showcase project. We right now only have the Split Howdy UI. Okay, so this library right now has inside of the source lib folder, the Angular CLI creates just a default set of components and services just for you to work with and to view. Quite frankly, you don't need any of this stuff, not right now anyway. So my recommendation in this tutorial, you're gonna delete them. So just hit the delete key and get rid of them. Move them all to the recycle bin, because we're gonna start fresh. We're gonna create our own components, the Howdy name component and the Howdy 10 component. Okay, cool. All right, so now let us generate the Howdy name component and start with that because it's the easiest one. So here, using the using the terminal here in our editor, we're going to call ng-generate module. So whenever you are working with components and adding and separating them out in your Angular library, you always want to start with a module. So here we're going to put our component inside of the name folder, and we're going to call it Howdy name. And right now this is not necessary, the project Split Howdy UI, but in the future when you have two projects in your web app, this is how you would determine using the Angular CLI where you want to create your components. Right now you don't need this, so I guess I could just get rid of it if I wanted to. Okay, because we only have one project in this web app. Okay, and then flat equals true. We don't want the Angular CLI to create another folder called Howdy name. We just want the Howdy name component file, spec file, CSS file, all created underneath name. Let's go. And then with some video movie magic, we're going to skip this process right now. Okay, we created the module. Now let's create the actual component. Okay, great. So now we have created our howdy name component on here. So let's go into the component, and I'm just going to delete all of this and just copy and paste what I had before. And I'm not going to need the template that comes with this component. And I'm not going to need the CSS file that comes with the component. I technically don't need the test spec file either, but we'll just leave it there. Okay, cool. All right, so now we have that particular component in there. Let us save some of these changes, and let's commit all that work. And what I'm going to do, just so you know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this into GitHub, and you can see all of the various different steps that I took in my Git commits, and then just download this file if you want to play around with it and just see how things were put together, so you don't have to watch the entire video again. So yeah, so that's what I'm going. So okay, so we've done what we've needed to do here, and just setting up the Angular library, just showing you how to use the Angular CLI to do that.